If you're here right now, reading these words, feeling something stir inside you, a whisper, a pull, a quiet knowing, then I want you to understand something. This is not an accident. You didn't stumble upon this message by chance. There are no coincidences in the architecture of consciousness, only appointments we keep with ourselves across time. And this, what we're about to explore together, is one of those appointments. My name carries a history, a lineage of seeking, of diving into the unseen waters where most fear to tread. For decades, I have sat with thousands of souls, some broken, some searching, some simply exhausted by the weight of a world that promises much but delivers little peace. I have watched patterns emerge, symbols repeat, mysteries unfold in the quiet spaces between words. And what I'm about to share with you is something that only a small fraction of humanity truly grasps, not because it's hidden in some secret vault, but because it requires a kind of courage most are not willing to summon. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, even if only to yourself. Have you ever felt like you're living two lives at once? One life where you go through the motions, work, obligations, routines, the endless scroll of distraction, and another life, a deeper one, where something ancient and knowing watches from within, waiting for you to remember. If you've felt this, even once, then you are part of that rare 1%. You are among those who sense that beneath the surface of ordinary existence lies a reality so profound, so transformative, that to truly see it is to never be the same again. Now, I'm going to make you a promise. In the time we spend together here, you will come to understand something that will reorganize the way you see yourself, your struggles, your relationships, and even your purpose. This isn't about giving you another theory to collect, another philosophy to debate. This is about revelation, a direct encounter with a truth that has been encoded in your very being since before you took your first breath. And here's the tension, the beautiful paradox. This truth can be your greatest blessing or your deepest wound, depending on what you choose to do with it. Before we go further, I want to invite you to do something. If this message resonates with you, if you feel that pull I mentioned, then subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the numbers, but because content like this, content that speaks to the soul rather than the ego, is rare. It's difficult to find voices that aren't trying to sell you something, that aren't promising you instant enlightenment or 3 easy steps to happiness. Here, we speak of what others are silent about. We honor the complexity of the human journey. And if you stay until the end, I'm going to ask you a question, a very specific question, and I want you to answer it in the comments. Your answer will not only help you integrate what you're about to learn, but it will also create a field of shared understanding among all of us walking this path together. And one more thing, if you know someone, a friend, a family member, someone who feels lost or is searching for something they can't quite name, share this with them, not as a favor to me, but as an act of care. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is offer someone a mirror, a reflection that says, You're not alone in what you're feeling. There's a reason for it, and there's a way through. So let's begin. Let's descend together into the mystery. Picture it like this. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a still, deep lake at twilight. The surface is smooth, reflective, showing you the sky, the trees, your own face looking back. Most people spend their entire lives staring at that surface, mesmerized by the reflections, never realizing that the real depth, the real truth, lies beneath. What I'm inviting you to do is to dive, to go under, to discover what has always been there, waiting. The secret that only 1% truly knows is this: you are not who you think you are. And I don't mean that in some abstract, mystical sense that sounds nice but means nothing. I mean it in the most literal, practical, life-altering way possible. The identity you've constructed, the story you tell yourself about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, what's possible for you, is not the truth. It's a costume, a role, a character you've been playing so long you've forgotten it's a performance. Now, before you dismiss this as just another spiritual platitude, stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal is the mechanism, the actual process by which this false identity was built, and more importantly, how it can be dismantled. This is where the 1% separates from the 99. Most people, when confronted with the idea that their identity is constructed, feel threatened. The ego rises up, defends itself, creates arguments, finds reasons to reject the message. But you, if you're still here, if you're still listening, you have the capacity to sit with discomfort, to allow the old structures to be questioned. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of your life, but the beginning of your conditioning. You were born as pure consciousness, a field of infinite potential, unbounded, free. You had no concept of limitation, no story about who you were supposed to be. You were simply presence, awareness, life itself expressing through a tiny body. But then, slowly, the world began to tell you who you were. Your parents, with all their love and all their wounds, projected onto you their hopes, their fears, their unmet needs. Society, with its rules and expectations, carved out a shape for you to fit into. Culture, religion, education, all of it conspired, not maliciously, but unconsciously, to mold you into something manageable, predictable, controllable. And here's the key. You learned to survive by adapting. You learned that certain behaviors brought approval, safety, love, and other behaviors brought rejection, punishment, abandonment. So you made a deal, an unconscious contract. You agreed to become the person they needed you to be in exchange for belonging. This is not a moral failing. This is not something to feel ashamed of. This is the human condition. Every single one of us has done this. But the 1%, the rare few, eventually reach a point where they realize the cost of that contract. They realize that in exchange for approval, they gave away their authenticity. In exchange for safety, they gave away their freedom. In exchange for love, they gave away their soul. Now you might be thinking, but I am who I am. I have my personality, my preferences, my beliefs. This is me. And I'm not here to tell you that none of that is real. What I'm saying is that much of what you think is you is actually a collection of borrowed ideas, inherited traumas, societal programming, and defensive strategies. The real you, the essence, the consciousness that witnesses all of this, is something far more vast, far more powerful, far more free than the character you've been playing. Let me give you an example, something concrete. Think about your inner critic, that voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, that you're going to fail, that you should be ashamed. Where did that voice come from? It didn't originate with you. It's an internalized version of someone else's judgment, a parent, a teacher, a peer, a culture that values achievement over being. But you've carried it for so long. You think it's your voice. You think it's protecting you, keeping you humble, keeping you safe. But really, it's a prison guard, keeping you small, keeping you contained within the boundaries of the false self. The 1% knows this. They've learned to distinguish between the voice of conditioning and the voice of truth. And here's how you can start to do the same. The voice of conditioning is always fear-based. It speaks in absolutes. It catastrophizes. It compares. It judges. The voice of truth, on the other hand, is calm. It's compassionate. It sees clearly without drama. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply knows. Now I want to pause here and offer you a mini revelation, something to keep you engaged, because what's coming next is going to challenge you even more deeply. Did you know that every major spiritual tradition, every ancient wisdom teaching, every mystical path, all point to the same fundamental insight? Whether it's the Buddhist concept of no self, the Hindu teaching of Atman and Brahman, the Christian mysticism of dying to the self to live in Christ, or the Sufi practice of fana, annihilation of the ego, they're all describing the same process, the dissolution of the false identity and the awakening to the true self. This isn't new. This isn't some modern self-help trend. This is the perennial truth that has been whispered through the ages by those who dared to look beyond the surface. But here's where it gets interesting, and here's where the 1% diverges even further from the rest. Knowing this intellectually changes nothing. You can read every spiritual book, attend every workshop, memorize every teaching, and still remain trapped in the illusion. Because the shift I'm talking about isn't cognitive, it's experiential. It's a felt sense, a direct knowing that arises not from the mind, but from the depths of your being. So how does this shift happen? How do you move from knowing about the truth to living it? This is the question that has occupied my life's work, the question I've explored in thousands of readings, in countless sessions with souls seeking liberation. And the answer is both simple and terrifyingly difficult. You must be willing to let go. You must be willing to release your grip on the identity you've built, the story you've been telling, the image you've been protecting. You must be willing to step into the unknown, into the void, into the space where you don't know who you are anymore. This is what I call the descent. It's the journey into the underworld of your own psyche, where all the rejected parts of yourself live. The shame, the grief, the rage, the longing, the fear. Most people spend their entire lives running from this descent. They stay busy, they stay distracted, they stay numb. They build walls of achievement, walls of addiction, walls of denial. But the 1%, they turn toward it. They understand that the only way out is through. They understand that the treasure, the gold, the liberation they seek is buried in the very place they've been avoiding. Let me tell you a story, a real story from my own experience. I once worked with a woman, let's call her Maria, who came to me in a state of complete despair. She had everything the world told her she should want: a successful career, a beautiful home, a loving family. But inside, she felt hollow, empty, like she was living someone else's life. She couldn't understand why she felt this way. She thought something was wrong with her. She thought she was ungrateful, broken, defective. In our sessions, we began to unravel the layers. We discovered that from a very young age, Maria had learned that her worth was tied to her achievements. Her parents, immigrants who had sacrificed everything, placed enormous pressure on her to succeed, to make their struggles worthwhile. And so, Maria became the perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect employee. She built an identity around being capable, responsible, strong. But in doing so, she buried the parts of herself that were soft, vulnerable, creative, playful. She buried her true desires, her true longings, because they didn't fit the image of who she was supposed to be. The turning point came when Maria allowed herself to grieve, not just for what she had lost, but for the life she had never allowed herself to live. She wept for the little girl who just wanted to dance, to paint, to dream, but was told those things were frivolous, impractical. She wept for the young woman who fell in love with poetry, but pursued law because it was safer, more respectable. She wept for all the moments she had said yes when she meant no, all the times she had smiled when she wanted to scream. And in that grief, something miraculous happened. The false self began to crack. The armor she had worn for so long began to fall away, and underneath she found herself, not the self that had been constructed to please others, but the self that had always been there, waiting, patient, eternal. She found her essence, and from that place she began to rebuild her life, not according to someone else's blueprint, but according to the truth of her own soul. This is the pattern I've seen again and again: the descent into grief, into the shadow, into the rejected self is the gateway to liberation. But it requires courage. It requires a willingness to feel what you've been avoiding, to face what you've been denying, to acknowledge what you've been pretending isn't there. Now I know some of you might be thinking, this sounds heavy. This sounds painful. Why would I choose this? And that's a fair question. Let me be clear. I'm not promising you that this path is easy. I'm not promising you that it won't hurt. What I'm promising you is that it's worth it. Because on the other side of that descent, on the other side of that grief, is a freedom you cannot even imagine from where you're standing now. It's the freedom to be yourself, fully, unapologetically. It's the freedom to live from your truth rather than your conditioning. It's the freedom to love without fear, to create without inhibition, to exist without the constant need for approval. And here's another layer, another dimension to this mystery. When you begin to dismantle the false self, when you begin to live from your essence, you don't just change your own life, you change the field around you. You become a permission slip for others to do the same. Your authenticity gives others permission to be authentic. Your courage gives others permission to be courageous. This is how transformation spreads, not through preaching or convincing, but through embodiment, through living example. Let me share another insight, something that might surprise you. The 1% I'm talking about, they're not necessarily the people you'd expect. They're not always the gurus, the teachers, the public figures. Often, they're ordinary people living quiet lives, but doing so with extraordinary presence. They're the grandmother who has weathered every storm with grace and still finds wonder in a sunrise. They're the artist who creates not for fame or money, but because their soul demands expression. They're the nurse who holds the hand of a dying patient and sees not a body, but a sacred being. They're the parent who apologizes to their child, who admits their mistakes, who breaks the cycle of inherited trauma. The 1% are those who have chosen consciousness over comfort, truth over convenience, love over fear. And the beautiful thing is, this isn't an exclusive club. This isn't something you're born into or locked out of. It's a choice you can make right now, in this moment. The question is, are you willing? Now, let's go deeper. Let's talk about the mechanics of consciousness, the actual structure of how you create your reality, because this is where the 1% has a distinct advantage. They understand that reality is not something that happens to them. Reality is something they participate in creating, moment by moment, through the quality of their attention, the nature of their beliefs, and the frequency of their emotional state. Most people live as victims of circumstance. They believe that the external world is fixed, solid, unchangeable, and that they must simply react to whatever comes their way. But quantum physics, ancient mysticism, and direct experience all point to a different truth. Consciousness is primary. Consciousness shapes matter. Your inner state influences your outer experience, not in some magical, wishful thinking way, but through subtle, powerful mechanisms that most people never become aware of. Let me explain. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every belief you hold creates a vibrational frequency. This frequency acts like a tuning fork, resonating with similar frequencies in the field of potential around you. This is not metaphor. This is physics. Everything is energy, vibrating at different rates. And like attracts like. When you're vibrating at the frequency of fear, you attract experiences that confirm your fear. When you're vibrating at the frequency of love, you attract experiences that reflect love. This is the law of resonance, and the 1% understands it intimately. But here's the catch. You can't fake your frequency. You can't pretend to feel love while harboring resentment and expect to attract loving experiences.
The universe doesn't respond to your words or your intentions. It responds to your state of being. This is why affirmations alone don't work. This is why vision boards without inner transformation are just pretty pictures. The 1% knows that real change happens from the inside out. They do the inner work first, healing the wounds, releasing the conditioning, aligning with their truth. And then the outer world begins to shift in response. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're trying to attract a loving relationship, but deep down, you believe you're unworthy of love. You might say all the right affirmations, visualize the perfect partner, put yourself out there. But as long as that core belief of unworthiness is running in the background, you'll either attract partners who confirm that belief, or you'll sabotage the relationships that could actually work. The 1% understands this. They know that before you can attract what you desire, you must become a vibrational match for it. And that means healing the beliefs, the wounds, the patterns that are out of alignment with what you want. This is the inner alchemy I'm talking about. This is the work that transforms lead into gold, suffering into wisdom, fear into love. And it's not a one-time event. It's a practice, a daily commitment to choosing consciousness, to choosing truth, to choosing love, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when every part of you wants to retreat back into the familiar patterns. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you. You might be feeling overwhelmed. You might be thinking, this is too much. I don't know where to start. I don't know if I'm capable of this. And I want to tell you, that's the voice of the false self, the conditioned self, trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you small. The truth is, you are absolutely capable. You wouldn't be here listening to these words if you weren't ready. Your soul has been preparing you for this moment your entire life. Every challenge you've faced, every heartbreak you've endured, every moment of doubt and despair, it's all been training, preparing you to step into your power, to claim your truth, to live from your essence. And you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to have it all figured out. The path reveals itself one step at a time. All you have to do is take the next step. Maybe that step is simply acknowledging that you've been living from a false self. Maybe it's allowing yourself to feel an emotion you've been suppressing. Maybe it's setting a boundary you've been afraid to set. Maybe it's speaking a truth you've been afraid to speak. Whatever it is, trust that you'll know. Your inner guidance, that quiet voice of truth, will show you the way. Let me share another dimension of this mystery, something that ties into the collective, the larger field of human consciousness. We are living in a time of great upheaval, great transformation. The old structures, political, economic, social, spiritual, are crumbling.
And this is not a sign of the end. This is a sign of a new beginning. The 1% understands that we are in the birth canal of a new paradigm, a new way of being human. And birth is messy, painful, chaotic, but it's also miraculous, necessary, sacred. What's happening on the global stage is a reflection of what's happening within each of us.
The collapse of the old systems mirrors the collapse of the old identity structures within our individual psyches. And just as we must let go of the false self to discover the true self, humanity must let go of the old paradigms to birth the new. This is not something to fear. This is something to embrace. Because on the other side of this chaos is a world where consciousness is valued over consumption, where connection is valued over competition, where love is valued over power. And you, by doing your inner work, by choosing to live from your truth, are contributing to this collective shift. You are part of the 1% who are holding the frequency of the new paradigm, anchoring it into the physical realm, making it possible for others to access. This is your purpose. This is why you're here. Not to escape the world, not to transcend the human experience, but to transform it from within. Now let's talk about resistance, because this is where most people get stuck. Resistance is the force that keeps you locked in the old patterns, the old identity, the old way of being. It shows up as procrastination, as distraction, as self-sabotage, as doubt. It's the voice that says, I'll start tomorrow. I'm not ready. I don't have time. I don't know how. And resistance is clever. It disguises itself as rational thought, as practical concern, as self-protection. But really, it's fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of what you might discover about yourself if you truly look. The 1% has learned to recognize resistance for what it is. They don't fight it, because fighting resistance only makes it stronger. Instead, they acknowledge it. They thank it for trying to keep them safe, and then they move forward anyway. They understand that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and taking action anyway. Courage is saying, I see you, resistance. I know you're scared, but I'm going to trust the deeper knowing, the soul's calling, more than I trust your warnings. And here's a secret. The more you practice moving through resistance, the weaker it becomes. It's like a muscle. The more you exercise your courage muscle, the stronger it gets. The more you choose truth over comfort, the easier it becomes. Not because the challenges disappear, but because you develop the capacity to meet them with grace, with presence, with trust. Let me offer you another story, another real example. I worked with a man, let's call him David, who had spent his entire adult life in a career he hated. He was a lawyer, successful by all external measures, but miserable inside. He dreamed of being a musician, of traveling the world, of living a life of creativity and freedom. But every time he considered making a change, resistance would rise up. You're too old. You have responsibilities. You'll lose everything. People will think you're crazy. And so he stayed, year after year, dying a slow death of the soul. Then one day, something shifted. He had a health scare, a moment where he confronted his own mortality. And in that moment, he realized that the greatest risk was not in changing, but in staying the same. The greatest risk was reaching the end of his life and realizing he had never truly lived. And so he made the leap. He left the law firm, he sold his house, he bought a van, and he started traveling, playing music in small venues, living simply, living authentically. Now, I'm not going to tell you it was easy. He faced judgment from family and friends. He faced financial uncertainty. He faced moments of doubt and fear. But he also experienced something he had never felt before: aliveness, joy, freedom. He told me, "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm actually living, not just existing. I feel like I'm me." This is what's possible when you choose to live from your truth. This is what's waiting on the other side of resistance. And I'm not saying you have to quit your job and buy a van. The specifics will be different for everyone, but the principle is the same. You must be willing to honor your soul's calling over your ego's need for security and approval. Now let's explore another layer of this mystery, the role of suffering. Because suffering is not random. Suffering is not punishment. Suffering is a messenger. It's your soul's way of telling you that something is out of alignment, that you're living in a way that's not true to your essence. The 1% understands this. They don't see suffering as something to avoid or numb or escape. They see it as information, as guidance, as an invitation to go deeper. Think about it. When do you grow the most? When do you transform the most? It's not during the easy times, the comfortable times. It's during the challenges, the crises, the dark nights of the soul. It's when everything you thought you knew is stripped away, when you're forced to confront yourself, when you have no choice but to let go of the old and trust the new. This is the alchemy of suffering. This is how pain becomes wisdom, how wounds become gifts, how darkness becomes light. But here's the key. Suffering only transforms you if you're willing to be with it, to feel it, to listen to it. If you numb it, if you distract yourself from it, if you project it onto others, it just stays stuck, festering, creating more pain. The 1% has learned to sit with their suffering, to hold it with compassion, to ask it, "What are you here to teach me? What am I not seeing? What needs to change?" And when you do this, when you turn toward your pain rather than away from it, something miraculous happens. The pain begins to dissolve, not because you've fixed anything externally, but because you've changed your relationship to it. You've stopped resisting it, stopped making it wrong, stopped making yourself wrong for feeling it. And in that acceptance, in that compassion, healing happens. Let me share a personal experience. There was a time in my life when I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness, a deep, aching feeling of being separate, disconnected, alone. I tried everything to make it go away. I stayed busy, I surrounded myself with people, I threw myself into my work, but the loneliness persisted. It was always there, lurking beneath the surface, waiting for a quiet moment to rise up and consume me. Finally, I stopped running. I sat with the loneliness. I allowed myself to feel it fully, without trying to change it, without trying to understand it, without trying to make it mean something about me. And as I sat with it, something shifted. I realized that the loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about being disconnected from myself. I had been so focused on external connection, on being seen and understood by others, that I had abandoned myself. I had stopped listening to my own inner voice, my own needs, my own truth. And in that moment of recognition, the loneliness transformed. It became a doorway, an invitation to come home to myself, to cultivate the most important relationship of all, the relationship with my own soul. And as I did that, as I learned to be present with myself, to listen to myself, to honor myself, the external loneliness began to dissolve. Not because I found someone to fill the void, but because there was no longer a void to fill. I was whole, complete in myself. This is the power of turning toward your suffering. This is the gift that only the 1% truly receives, because they're willing to do what most people won't. They're willing to feel. Now let's talk about the role of the body in all of this, because the body is not separate from consciousness. The body is not just a vehicle for the mind. The body is consciousness embodied. It's the physical expression of your inner state, and it holds wisdom, memory, trauma, truth in ways that the mind cannot access. The 1% understands that true transformation must include the body. You can have all the insights, all the realizations, all the spiritual experiences, but if you're not integrating them into your physical being, they remain abstract, disconnected, incomplete. This is why practices like yoga, breathwork, dance, somatic therapy are so powerful. They bring awareness into the body. They release what's been stored. They create coherence between mind, heart, and body. Let me give you an example. Trauma is not just a psychological experience. Trauma is stored in the body. It lives in your nervous system, in your muscles, in your tissues. And until you address it at that level, it will continue to run your life, creating patterns of reactivity, of tension, of disconnection. The 1% knows this. They work with the body, not just the mind. They learn to feel their sensations, to track their nervous system, to release what's being held. And when you do this, when you bring consciousness into the body, you access a whole new level of healing, of integration, of wholeness. You begin to feel safe in your own skin. You begin to trust your body's signals, your body's wisdom. You begin to live in a more embodied,
grounded, present way. Now, I want to circle back to something I mentioned earlier, the idea that you are creating your reality. Because this is where a lot of confusion and misunderstanding happens. People hear this and they think, so if I'm creating my reality, then everything that happens to me is my fault. If I'm sick, it's because I created it. If I'm struggling, it's because I'm not manifesting correctly. And this is a dangerous distortion of the truth. Let me be clear. You are not responsible for everything that happens to you. You did not create the circumstances of your birth, the family you were born into, the societal structures you inherited, the traumas you experienced. Those were given to you, not by some cosmic punishment, but by the complex interplay of karma, lineage, collective consciousness, and randomness. What you are responsible for is how you respond to what happens. You are responsible for the meaning you make, the story you tell, the choices you make moving forward. The 1% understands this distinction.
They don't blame themselves for their circumstances, but they also don't see themselves as victims. They see themselves as co-creators, working with what is, shaping it, transforming it through the power of their consciousness, their choices, their actions. This is empowerment without bypassing. This is responsibility without self-blame. And here's another crucial point. Creating your reality is not about controlling outcomes. It's not about forcing the universe to give you what you want. It's about aligning with the flow of life, with the intelligence that moves through all things, and allowing that intelligence to guide you. It's about surrendering the ego's agenda and trusting the soul's wisdom. It's about being open to what wants to emerge rather than clinging to what you think should happen. This is the dance between effort and surrender, between doing and being, between will and grace. The 1% has learned this dance. They know when to push and when to let go, when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to be silent. They've developed a sensitivity, an attunement to the subtle currents of life, and this attunement allows them to move with life rather than against it. Let me share another insight, something that might shift your perspective even further. The 1% knows that everything is interconnected. There is no separation between you and the world, between you and others, between you and the divine. This is not just a nice spiritual idea. This is the fundamental nature of reality. We are all expressions of the same consciousness, the same source, the same life force. And when you truly understand this, when you feel this in your bones, it changes everything. It changes how you see others. You stop seeing them as separate, as threats, as competition. You see them as reflections of yourself, as fellow travelers on the same journey. It changes how you see the world. You stop seeing it as something to conquer, to exploit, to escape. You see it as sacred, as alive, as an extension of your own being. It changes how you see yourself. You stop seeing yourself as small, isolated, insignificant. You see yourself as part of the whole, as essential,
as divine. And from this place of interconnection, compassion arises naturally, not as a moral obligation, but as a spontaneous response to the recognition that we are all one. When you hurt another, you hurt yourself. When you heal yourself, you heal the world. This is the truth that the 1% lives from. This is the truth that transforms not just individual lives, but the entire fabric of existence. Now, I want to address something that might be stirring in you. You might be feeling inspired, excited, ready to make changes, and that's beautiful. But I also want to offer a word of caution. Beware of spiritual bypassing. Beware of using these teachings to avoid the messy, difficult human parts of your experience. Beware of using concepts like everything is perfect or it's all an illusion to bypass your pain, your anger, your grief, your responsibility. The 1% knows that true spirituality is not about transcending the human experience. It's about fully embracing it, fully inhabiting it, fully honoring it. It's about being both human and divine, both wounded and whole, both broken and beautiful. It's about holding the paradox, the tension, the complexity, without needing to resolve it into some neat, tidy answer. This is the path of embodied spirituality. This is the path that honors the shadow as much as the light, the descent as much as the ascent, the earth as much as the heavens. And it's a path that requires humility, honesty, and a willingness to be wrong, to not know, to keep learning, to keep growing. Let me offer you another practical tool, something you can use right now to begin this journey. It's called the practice of presence. Presence is simply the act of being fully here, fully now, fully aware. It's not thinking about the past or worrying about the future. It's not lost in stories or judgments or fantasies. It's just being right here, right now, with what is. And the beautiful thing about presence is that it's always available. You don't need any special circumstances, any special training, any special equipment. You just need to pause, to breathe, to bring your awareness into this moment. Feel your body. Notice your breath. Hear the sounds around you. See the light, the colors, the shapes. This is presence. This is the doorway to everything I've been talking about. Because when you're present, you're not identified with the false self. The false self lives in the past and the future, in the stories and the judgments. But presence is prior to all of that. Presence is the true self, the essence, the consciousness that witnesses everything without being caught in it. And the more you practice presence, the more you strengthen your connection to that true self. The more you live from that place of freedom, of peace, of love. Now, I want to take you even deeper. Let's talk about the nature of reality itself,
The fundamental question that has occupied mystics and philosophers for millennia. What is real? The 1% has discovered something that most people never consider. Reality is not fixed. Reality is fluid, malleable, responsive to consciousness. The world you see, the experiences you have, are not objective facts. They are interpretations, constructions, created by the interplay of your senses, your beliefs, your conditioning, and the field of infinite potential. This doesn't mean that nothing is real. It means that reality is far more mysterious, far more participatory than we've been taught to believe. It means that you have far more power, far more influence than you've been led to think. And it means that the key to transforming your life is not to change the external circumstances, but to change your internal state, your consciousness, your way of seeing. Let me give you an example. Two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different responses. One person loses their job and falls into despair, seeing it as proof of their failure, their unworthiness. Another person loses their job and sees it as an opportunity, a liberation, a chance to pursue something they've always wanted. Same event, different reality. Why? Because reality is not the event itself. Reality is the meaning you assign to the event, the story you tell about it, the emotional response you have to it. The 1% understands this. They know that they are the authors of their own story. They know that they can choose how to interpret what happens, how to respond, how to move forward. And this is not about positive thinking or denying the difficulty of a situation. It's about recognizing that you always have a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. You always have the power to choose your response, your perspective, your next step. And here's where it gets really interesting. When you change your internal state, when you shift your consciousness, the external world begins to shift in response. Not magically, not instantly, but gradually, subtly, powerfully. Opportunities appear that weren't there before. People show up who can help. Synchronicities occur that guide you forward. This is not wishful thinking. This is the law of resonance in action. This is consciousness shaping reality. Now let's talk about purpose, because this is something that weighs heavily on many people's hearts. What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do with my life? And the 1% has a very different understanding of purpose than most people. They don't see purpose as some grand external mission that you have to figure out and then execute. They see purpose as something that emerges naturally when you align with your true self, when you live from your essence, when you follow your joy, your curiosity, your passion. Your purpose is not something you find, it's something you become. It's the natural expression of who you are when you're not trying to be someone else, when you're not living from conditioning, when you're not seeking approval or avoiding rejection. Your purpose is simply to be yourself, fully, authentically, courageously. And from that place of authenticity, your unique gifts, your unique contribution will naturally flow. This is so liberating because it means you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know the end goal.
You just have to take the next step. Follow the next thread of curiosity. Honor the next impulse of joy. And as you do that, as you trust the process, your purpose will reveal itself, not as a destination, but as a journey, a continuous unfolding of your soul's expression. Let me share one more story, one more example of this principle in action. I worked with a young woman, let's call her Sophia, who was paralyzed by the question of purpose. She had so many interests, so many talents, but she couldn't choose. She was afraid of making the wrong choice, of wasting her life, of missing her calling. And so she stayed stuck, doing nothing, waiting for some cosmic sign to tell her what to do. In our work together, I invited her to let go of the need to know. I invited her to simply follow what brought her alive, what made her curious, what felt like play. And she started small. She took a pottery class just because it sounded fun, and she loved it. She felt something awaken in her, something creative, something primal, something joyful. So she kept going. She started making pieces, experimenting, exploring, and eventually she started selling her work, teaching classes, building a community around her art. Now, was pottery her grand purpose? Maybe, maybe not. But it didn't matter, because in following her joy, in honoring her curiosity, she was living her purpose. She was being herself. She was contributing her unique gift to the world. And that's all purpose ever is, the authentic expression of who you are. So if you're struggling with the question of purpose, I invite you to let it go. Stop trying to figure it out. Stop waiting for permission. Stop looking for the perfect answer. Just start. Start with what brings you alive. Start with what makes you curious. Start with what feels like play. And trust that the path will reveal itself as you walk it. Now, as we begin to move toward the close of our time together, I want to offer you a few final reflections, a few final invitations. The 1% that I've been speaking about, they're not special in the sense of being better than anyone else. They're special in the sense that they've made a choice, a commitment to live consciously, to live authentically, to live courageously. And that choice is available to you right now in this moment. You don't have to wait until you're ready. You don't have to wait until you're healed. You don't have to wait until you have it all figured out. You can choose right now to step into that 1%. You can choose to start questioning your conditioning, to start feeling your feelings, to start honoring your truth. You can choose to stop living from fear and start living from love. You can choose to stop being a victim and start being a creator. You can choose to stop hiding and start shining. And I know it's scary. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it feels risky. But I also know that the cost of not choosing, the cost of staying small, the cost of living a life that's not true to your soul is far greater than any temporary discomfort you might feel in the process of transformation. So here's my invitation. Make the choice. Commit to the path.
Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but sincerely, honestly, courageously. Commit to doing the inner work, to facing your shadows, to healing your wounds, to releasing your conditioning. Commit to living from your truth, to honoring your soul, to expressing your gifts. Commit to being part of the 1% who are choosing consciousness, who are choosing love, who are choosing to be the change they wish to see in the world. And remember, you're not alone on this path. There are others, many others, walking it with you. We may not all know each other, we may not all be visible to each other, but we're connected, part of the same movement, the same awakening, the same transformation. And every time one of us chooses truth, chooses love, chooses consciousness, it makes it easier for the next person, and the next, and the next. We are creating a new field, a new possibility, a new paradigm together. Now, before we close, I want to honor the journey you've taken with me here. If you've stayed with me this far, if you've allowed these words to penetrate, to stir something in you, then you are already part of that 1%. You are already on the path. And I want to acknowledge that, to celebrate that, to encourage you to keep going. The road ahead will have its challenges. There will be moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when you want to give up, to go back to the old ways, to the familiar patterns. And in those moments, I want you to remember this: you are not alone. You are supported by something far greater than yourself, by the intelligence of life itself, by the love that moves through all things. And you are capable of far more than you know. You have within you everything you need to navigate this journey, to transform your life, to become who you truly are. So trust yourself, trust the process, trust the mystery, and keep walking, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one choice at a time, because every step you take toward your truth, every moment you choose consciousness over conditioning, every time you honor your soul over your ego, you are not just changing your own life, you are changing the world. And now, as I promised at the beginning, I have a question for you. I want you to take a moment to reflect on everything we've explored together. And then I want you to answer this in the comments. What is one pattern, one belief, one behavior that you're ready to release? What is one thing you've been carrying that no longer serves you, that you're ready to let go of? And what is one truth, one desire, one aspect of your authentic self that you're ready to claim, to honor, to express? This is not just a question. This is a practice. This is a way of making conscious what has been unconscious, of naming what has been hidden, of committing to what has been avoided. And when you write it down, when you share it, you're not just telling me, you're telling yourself. You're declaring to the universe, to your own soul, that you're ready. You're ready to step into the 1%. You're ready to live from your truth. You're ready to be free.
So take a moment, breathe, feel into your heart, and then share. Share your truth, share your commitment, share your journey. Because your words, your voice, your story matters. It matters to you, it matters to me, and it matters to everyone else who is walking this path.
And if this message has touched you, if it has awakened something in you, if it has given you hope or clarity or courage, then I invite you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with a friend who's struggling, a family member who's searching, a stranger who's lost. Because this is how we create change. Not through grand gestures, but through small acts of love, of care, of connection. And finally, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, because we're going to continue this journey together. We're going to keep exploring the mysteries, the truths, the practices that support conscious living, authentic being, soulful expression. And I want you to be part of this community, this field of shared awakening, this movement of the 1%. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having the courage to question, to seek, to grow. You are seen, you are valued, you are loved, and you are exactly where you need to be. May you walk in truth. May you live in love. May you remember who you truly are, and may you have the courage to express that truth, to share that love, to be that light in every moment, in every breath, in every choice. Until we meet again, I hold you in my heart, in my prayers, in my vision of a world where consciousness reigns, where love prevails, where every soul is free to be exactly who they came here to be. Blessings on your journey, my friend. Blessings on your path. And blessings on the beautiful, mysterious, sacred unfolding of your soul. Remember, you are not who you think you are. You are so much more. And the world is waiting for you to remember, to awaken, to shine. So go forth, be brave, be true, be you. This is the secret that only 1% knows. And now you know it too. But knowing is just the beginning. The real journey starts when you take this knowing and translate it into living, into being, into action. Because the 1% doesn't just understand these truths intellectually. They embody them, they live them, they breathe them. And that's what I want to explore with you now in these final moments we have together. I want to give you some practical guidance, some concrete steps you can take to begin embodying this wisdom, to begin living as part of that 1%. First, let's talk about energy. Everything I've shared with you today is ultimately about energy. The energy you hold, the energy you emit, the energy you attract. And the 1% has learned to become conscious stewards of their energy. They understand that their energy is their most precious resource, more valuable than time, more valuable than money, more valuable than any external possession, and they guard it fiercely, not from a place of fear or scarcity, but from a place of wisdom and self-respect. What does this mean practically? It means becoming aware of what drains your energy and what nourishes it. It means noticing which people, which environments, which activities, which thoughts leave you feeling depleted and which ones leave you feeling alive, expanded, inspired. And then it means making conscious choices based on that awareness. It means saying no to what depletes you, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disappoints others, even when it goes against what you've been taught you should do. And it means saying yes to what nourishes you, even when it feels selfish, even when it doesn't make logical sense, even when others don't understand. This is not about being rigid or controlling. This is about honoring yourself, about recognizing that you cannot give from an empty cup, that you cannot be of service to the world if you're running on fumes, if you're constantly sacrificing yourself, if you're perpetually exhausted. The 1% knows that self-care is not selfish. Self-care is sacred. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. Let me give you some specific practices, some tools you can use to manage your energy consciously. The first is the practice of energetic boundaries. This is the ability to be in the presence of others without taking on their emotions, their stress, their drama. It's the ability to remain centered in yourself, grounded in your own truth, even when the world around you is chaotic. And the way you develop this is through awareness and intention. When you're about to enter a challenging situation, a difficult conversation, a stressful environment, a gathering with people who drain you, take a moment to center yourself. Close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and visualize a protective field of light around you. This isn't about shutting people out or being cold. This is about creating a container for your own energy, a sacred space within which you can remain yourself, remain true, remain whole. And then, as you move through the situation, keep checking in with yourself. Notice when you start to feel pulled, when you start to lose your center, when you start to take on what isn't yours. And in those moments, breathe. Return to your body, return to your boundary, return to yourself. Another powerful practice is the art of energetic clearing. Throughout the day, you pick up energy from everywhere, from people, from places, from the collective field. And if you don't clear it regularly, it accumulates, it weighs you down, it clouds your clarity. So the 1% has rituals, practices for clearing their energy field. This might be as simple as taking a shower with the intention of washing away what isn't yours. It might be spending time in nature, allowing the earth to ground you, the wind to cleanse you, the sun to recharge you. It might be movement, dancing, shaking, yoga, anything that gets the energy moving through your body rather than stuck in it. It might be sound, singing, chanting, listening to music that uplifts your spirit. Find what works for you and make it a regular practice, not just when you're feeling heavy, but as a daily ritual of self-care. Now, let's talk about shadow work, because this is one of the most important practices of the 1%, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. The shadow is the part of yourself that you've rejected, denied, hidden away. It's the anger you're not allowed to feel, the desire you're ashamed of, the weakness you can't admit, the power you're afraid to claim. And the shadow doesn't go away just because you ignore it. In fact, the more you ignore it, the more power it has over you. It runs your life from the unconscious, creating patterns of self-sabotage, projection, and reactivity. The 1% understands that the path to wholeness requires integrating the shadow, bringing it into the light, reclaiming the parts of yourself that you've disowned. And this is not comfortable work. This is not pretty work. This is the work of descending into the darkness, facing the parts of yourself you've been running from, and learning to hold them with compassion rather than judgment. How do you do shadow work? It starts with noticing your triggers, your reactions, your judgments. Whenever you have a strong emotional response to someone or something, that's a clue. That's the shadow speaking. Instead of projecting it outward, blaming the other person or the situation, turn it inward. Ask yourself, what is this showing me about myself? What part of me is being reflected here? What am I not willing to see or feel or own? For example, if you find yourself constantly irritated by people who are loud and attention-seeking, ask yourself, where in my life have I suppressed my own voice? Where have I made myself small? Where am I afraid to be seen?
The irritation is pointing you toward a disowned part of yourself, perhaps a part that wants to be expressive, that wants to be noticed, but that you've judged as wrong or inappropriate. Or if you find yourself judging people who are vulnerable, who cry easily, who show their emotions, ask yourself, where have I shut down my own vulnerability? Where have I armored my heart? Where am I afraid to feel? The judgment is showing you a part of yourself that you've rejected, your own tenderness, your own need, your own humanity. This is the gift of shadow work. Every judgment, every trigger, every strong reaction is an invitation to reclaim a lost part of yourself. And as you do this work, as you integrate your shadow, something miraculous happens. You become more whole, more authentic, more free. You stop projecting your disowned parts onto others. You stop being controlled by unconscious patterns. You start to live from choice rather than compulsion, from consciousness rather than conditioning. Now, let's explore the dimension of relationships, because this is where so much of our growth happens, and this is where the 1% operates very differently than most people. The 1% understands that relationships are not about finding someone to complete you, to fix you, to make you happy. Relationships are mirrors, teachers, opportunities for growth and healing. And the quality of your relationships is a direct reflection of your relationship with yourself. If you don't love yourself, you'll attract people who don't love you. If you don't respect yourself, you'll attract people who don't respect you. If you're not honest with yourself, you'll attract people who lie to you. This is not punishment. This is resonance.
This is the universe showing you, through your relationships, what needs to be healed within you. The 1% takes responsibility for their relationships. They don't blame their partner for their unhappiness. They don't expect their friends to read their minds. They don't wait for others to change. They look at what's showing up in their relationships and they ask, what is this teaching me? What pattern am I repeating? What wound is being activated? What am I being called to heal? And they communicate. They speak their truth even when it's uncomfortable. They express their needs even when they're afraid of being rejected. They set boundaries even when they're afraid of being abandoned. They apologize when they're wrong. They forgive when they're hurt. They choose love over being right, connection over control, vulnerability over protection. This doesn't mean they tolerate abuse or disrespect. This doesn't mean they stay in relationships that are harmful. The 1% knows when to stay and work through the challenges, and when to leave and honor their own well-being. They know the difference between a relationship that's difficult because it's triggering growth and a relationship that's toxic because it's violating their boundaries. And they have the courage to make the hard choices, to walk away from what no longer serves them, even when it's painful, even when they're afraid of being alone. Let me share something about loneliness, because this is a fear that keeps so many people trapped in unfulfilling relationships, in soul-crushing jobs, in lives that don't reflect their truth. The fear of being alone, of being rejected, of being unloved, is one of the deepest fears we carry. And it's often this fear that drives us to abandon ourselves, to betray our truth, to settle for less than we deserve. But the 1% has made peace with loneliness. They've learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. They've learned that solitude can be sacred, a space for self-discovery, for creativity, for communion with the divine. They've learned that the relationship with themselves is the most important relationship they'll ever have, and that when that relationship is strong, when they truly love and accept themselves, the external loneliness loses its power. This doesn't mean they don't desire connection. This doesn't mean they don't value relationships. It means they come to relationships from a place of wholeness rather than neediness, from a place of choice rather than desperation, from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And this changes everything. It changes the quality of the relationships they attract. It changes the way they show up in those relationships. It changes the entire dynamic from codependence to interdependence, from fear to love. Now, let's talk about intuition, because this is one of the most powerful tools the 1% has cultivated. And it's one that our modern, rational, mind-dominated culture has largely dismissed
and devalued. Intuition is your soul's guidance system. It's the quiet voice of knowing that arises not from logic or analysis, but from a deeper wisdom, a connection to the field of consciousness, to the intelligence that moves through all things. Everyone has intuition, but most people have learned to ignore it, to override it with rational thought, to dismiss it as irrational or unreliable.
The 1% has learned to trust it, to listen to it, to follow it, even when it doesn't make logical sense, even when they can't explain it, even when others think they're crazy. How do you develop your intuition? First, you have to learn to distinguish it from the voice of fear, from the voice of conditioning, from the voice of wishful thinking. Intuition has a particular quality. It's calm, clear, neutral. It doesn't argue or convince. It simply knows. It often comes as a feeling in your body, a sense of expansion or contraction, of yes or no, of rightness or wrongness. It might come as a sudden knowing, a flash of insight, a quiet certainty. The voice of fear, on the other hand, is urgent, anxious, catastrophizing. It's trying to protect you, to keep you safe, but it's operating from past trauma, from old wounds, from worst-case scenarios. The voice of conditioning is the should voice, the voice that tells you what you're supposed to do, what's expected of you, what's proper or acceptable. And the voice of wishful thinking is the voice that tells you what you want to hear, that denies reality, that creates fantasy to avoid facing truth. Learning to distinguish between these voices takes practice, takes awareness, takes a willingness to be honest with yourself. And the way you develop this skill is by experimenting, by following your intuition in small ways and seeing what happens, by noticing when you ignored your intuition and regretted it, by paying attention to the subtle signals your body and your soul are constantly sending you. And here's something important. Intuition is not always comfortable. Sometimes your intuition will guide you towards something that scares you, that challenges you, that takes you out of your comfort zone. This is because your soul is not interested in keeping you comfortable. Your soul is interested in your growth, your evolution, your awakening. So trust that even when intuition leads you into the unknown, into the uncertain, into the uncomfortable, it's leading you toward your highest good, toward your deepest truth, toward your soul's purpose. Let's explore the concept of surrender, because this is perhaps the most paradoxical and the most powerful practice of the 1%. Surrender is not giving up. Surrender is not passivity. Surrender is not resignation. Surrender is the active choice to release control, to trust the flow of life, to align with what is rather than fighting against it. We live in a culture that worships control, that tells us we can and should manage every aspect of our lives, that sees surrender as weakness. But the 1% knows that true power comes not from controlling life, but from dancing with it,
from working with it, from allowing it to move through you, rather than constantly trying to force it to conform to your will. Surrender is what happens when you've done everything you can do and you let go of the outcome. It's what happens when you stop trying to make something happen and you allow it to unfold in its own time, in its own way. It's what happens when you release your attachment to how things should be and you open to how things are. This doesn't mean you don't take action. This doesn't mean you don't have goals or desires or intentions. It means you hold them lightly. It means you do your part, and then you trust.
You plant the seeds, and then you let the garden grow. You don't dig up the seeds every day to check if they're sprouting. You water them, you tend them, and you trust the intelligence of nature to do the rest. Surrender is also what happens in the face of loss, of grief, of circumstances you cannot change. It's the moment when you stop fighting reality, when you stop asking, why me? When you stop resisting what is, and you simply allow yourself to feel it, to be with it, to move through it. And in that surrender, in that acceptance, there is a strange peace, a deep relief, a letting go of the exhausting effort of trying to control the uncontrollable. I want to share with you one more practice, one more tool that the 1% uses to stay aligned, to stay conscious, to stay connected to their truth. It's the practice of daily reflection, of taking time each day to pause, to check in, to assess where you are, what you're feeling, what you're learning, what you're being called to do. This might look like journaling, where you write freely about your experiences, your emotions, your insights, your questions. It might look like meditation, where you sit in silence and simply observe your thoughts, your sensations, your breath. It might look like prayer, where you speak to the divine, to your higher self, to the intelligence that guides you, and you listen for the response. It might look like a walk in nature, where you allow the rhythm of your steps and the beauty around you to bring you into presence, into clarity, into connection. The form doesn't matter. What matters is that you create a sacred space in your day for introspection, for self-inquiry, for communion with your soul. Because without this practice, it's so easy to get lost in the busyness, the noise, the demands of the external world. It's so easy to lose touch with yourself, with your truth, with your purpose. The daily practice of reflection is what keeps you anchored, what keeps you aligned, what keeps you conscious. And in this practice, ask yourself powerful questions, not questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no, but questions that invite deeper exploration, deeper truth. Questions like, what am I grateful for today? What challenged me today? And what did it teach me? Where did I abandon myself today? And where did I honor myself? What am I afraid of right now? What am I avoiding? What is my soul
calling me toward? What would love do in this situation? What does my highest self want me to know?
These questions, when asked sincerely, when asked from a place of genuine curiosity rather than judgment, will open doors within you. They will reveal truths you didn't know you knew. They will guide you forward on your path. They will keep you connected to the 1%, to the consciousness, to the awakening that is your birthright. Now, as we truly come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with one final reflection, one final truth that I believe is essential for anyone walking this path, and it's this: you are enough. Right now, exactly as you are enough. You don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to achieve some perfect state of enlightenment before you're worthy of love, of respect, of belonging. The journey I've been describing, the path of the 1%, is not about becoming better than you are. It's about becoming more fully yourself. It's about peeling away the layers of conditioning, the false beliefs, the protective armor, and revealing the truth that has always been there. You are a divine being, a sacred expression of consciousness, a unique and irreplaceable part of the whole. And yes, there is work to do. Yes, there are wounds to heal, patterns to release, shadows to integrate. But this work is not about fixing what's broken. This work is about remembering what's whole. It's about uncovering what has always been true, what has always been perfect, what has always been enough. So be gentle with yourself on this journey. Be patient. Be compassionate. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Forgive your setbacks, your mistakes, your moments of forgetting, because this is not a linear path. This is a spiral. You will circle back to the same lessons, the same challenges, the same wounds, again and again. But each time you do, you'll meet them from a deeper place, with more awareness, with more capacity, with more love. And remember, you are not walking this path alone. You are part of a global awakening, a collective shift, a movement of consciousness that is transforming our world from the inside out. Every time you choose truth, every time you choose love, every time you choose consciousness, you are contributing to this shift. You are making it easier for the next person, and the next, and the next. So keep going, keep choosing, keep growing, keep shining your light, no matter how small it might seem, no matter how dark the world around you might appear, because your light matters. Your truth matters. Your presence matters. You matter. And know that I am with you, not just in this moment, but in every moment you choose to remember, to awaken, to live from your truth. We are connected, you and I, part of the same consciousness, the same source, the same love. And in that connection, there is strength, there is support, there is an infinite well of wisdom and grace to draw from. So go now with my blessing, with my love, with my absolute faith in your capacity to walk this path, to live this truth, to be the magnificent being you came here to be.
The world needs you, not the false you, not the conditioned you, not the small you. The world needs the real you, the authentic you, the radiant you. Be brave, be true, be free, and know that you are loved, you are seen, you are held, always and in all ways. This is the secret that only 1% knows, and now you know it too.